Well, good morning. It is great to be here. I was reflecting this morning. I've been coming here as long as Jill's been here. My first engagement here, I think, was in 2005, and you were meeting in a senior center somewhere. So that's 20 years. Um, Thank you. There is a whole lot of wisdom out there, particularly in the Eastern traditions, that would suggest that equanimity, acceptance of what is the pathway to inner peace, maybe even to enlightenment. In fact, there's a Zen Buddhist maxim that would say the great way is easy for one with no preferences. Simple, right? Yet, as an oncology chaplain, every day I walk beside folks for whom a cancer diagnosis is automatic entry into the veritable Olympics of acceptance. And Zen masters be damned, every patient I have walked beside has certainly had their preferences. They would have chosen anything other than this. Stage 4 cancer at age 40? Are you kidding? I can't accept that. I can't accept that it happened to me, that it happened to my family. I want my old life back. Even though resistance to what is, no matter what our circumstances, only solidifies and deepens our suffering, guarantees it, in fact, leaving us stranded miles away from any oasis we would ever call inner peace. At the same time, we live in a culture that absolutely reveres self-reliance and abhors what it perceives as self-pity. That part of us that would characterize our experience as self-pity is the very same part that robs us of any experience of authentic self-compassion. I don't know that we can have acceptance without self-compassion. It's a dance. The two go together. While we might have this lofty aspiration for equanimity for all things, I'm also encumbered by all too human feelings of sorrow and grief and despair and rage. What about equanimity for those feelings? Daryl's newly diagnosed with a rare sarcoma, but at this point is absolutely asymptomatic. Looks and feels just great. It's kind of crazy making, Michael. I'm only sick because the doctor tells me I am. So I guess I just carry on as normally as possible, right? Still, he's heard enough from the oncologist and read enough to know, have a sense of what's coming down the pike, and that leaves him terrified, of course. But I don't dare feel any of those feelings, Michael. If I do, I'll go down a dark hole. I'll never come back. It's a pretty common perception that if I allow myself to feel my feelings, I'm somehow going to get sucked down and never come back. What I have found to be true is the exact opposite. That when I give my feelings the light of day, give them some air, it can rob them of their power. They can loosen their grip from around my throat. And I'm afforded the perspective to see, oh, they're just feelings. And as the poet Rilke reminds us, no feeling is final. A few years ago, one of the oncologists referred me to Vicky, who was so distressed that the doctor thought she might need a psychiatric evaluation. In any event, Michael, she's up in the infusion clinic now, and she's sobbing uncontrollably. Will you go see her? Well, Vicky had been living with a rare lymphoma for about 15 years, and in those 15 years had been on maybe a dozen different drug protocols. Each one worked for a time, and then, as it is with cancer drugs, stopped working. Today was day one of yet another drug protocol, and Vicky was just cooked, absolutely fried. But by the time I got upstairs to hear her tell it, Michael, really, I'm so blessed. Truly, look, at least my cancer is treatable, and I have the best oncologist around. I have great insurance, the best husband you can imagine, kids, grandkids, deep Christian faith, wonderful church community. Really, I'm so blessed. And it was like the longer she talked, the less oxygen there was in the room, as if the rope were getting tighter around her neck because she just couldn't reconcile these all too human emotions of weariness and frustration and despair and resentment with her attachment to her identity as Little Miss Sunshine. What's more, an even more fierce attachment to positivity above all else. I mean, Michael, look around here. So many others have it so much worse. Why am I such a crybaby? There's absolutely no self-compassion in that statement. No grace, allowance to be a human being. So no self-compassion, no acceptance either. As if she were trying to compose a symphony called Vicky, but had decided that only these 4 or 5 notes would be acceptable to be used. Only these sweet high notes of gratitude and hope and forgiveness and joy. No room for deep, dark notes of despair, depression, frustration, anger, resentment. It takes all 88 keys on a piano to write a full-bodied symphony. All those sweet high notes, all those deep, dark low notes, and everything in between. A few dark notes in the symphony of Vicky does not make her less of who she is. It makes her more. I see this as a kind of dance between self-compassion and acceptance. I'm reminded of a toy I had when I was a little boy, a gizmo with a trigger on it, and you pulled the trigger and this card spun around really quickly. On one side of the card might be the image of a bird, on the other side a bird cage. As you pulled the trigger, the card spun. It looked as if the bird was in the cage. Each side of the card is telling the truth for what it is. This is a bird cage. But I only get the complete picture by the constant movement between the two. What if it's like that between acceptance and self-compassion? The older I get, I tell you, the more depth of meaning I find in the most deceptively simple song lyrics written by the American masters of the American songbooks, very old songs, like the Gershwins, Rodgers and Hart, Cole Porter, Jerome Kern. Songs I might have even called corny once upon a time. Irving Berlin was one such master. Let's face the music and dance. Before the fiddlers have fled, before they ask us to pay the bill, and while we still have a chance, let's face the music and dance. Maybe I have been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer or some other tragedy has befallen me. Maybe it's incumbent upon me to face the music, to accept it, if you will, but also to dance with it, to dance with all of it and all of the attendant feelings, the despair, the sorrow, the fear, the grief, but also perhaps the love and the hope that's buried in there when everything else has burnt away. Maybe that can be a pathway to the great way, that dance. A few years ago, I had a patient, Kelly, who used to come to my spiritual reflection group every week, and she would often make a comment, something to the effect of, I hate that word acceptance, Michael. I do not accept that I have cancer. To me, that implies that I approve, and I don't approve. I will never approve. I acknowledge that I have cancer, but I don't accept it. I got a real vivid lesson in acceptance 8 years ago, 2017. I got to take the most magnificent solo trip to Nepal and Bhutan. Second to the last day of the trip, which happens to be 8 years ago today, was one of the most splendid, rich, beautiful days of my entire life. Along with my guide, my friend Sai Wang, we climbed up to Tiger Nest Monastery outside of Paro, Bhutan. A magnificent 16th century Buddhist monastery, perilously and improbably hanging off the side of a mountain with this stunning view of the mountains and the valley below. It's only accessible by foot, and it's quite an arduous climb to get there, not unlike climbing to the top of Yosemite Falls. And it's a site of sacred pilgrimage for the Bhutanese people. All are expected to make that climb at some point in their lives, if they can. So Sai Wang and I made that climb, and when we reached the gates of the compound, we took our shoes off and went inside, and the first thing I saw was this big, fat, old orange tabby cat snoozing in the narrow shaft of sunlight coming in through this narrow slit of a window right next to an altar with a monk tending to the altar. Sai Wang showed me around the place, and we sat down in the great hall and meditated for a time, and then we lit a few butter lamp candles, sending up healing prayers for loved ones, patients, my mom. With our spirits full to the brim, we descended back down the mountain, talking every step of the way, just about everything in life. We got to the bottom, and I was treated to a surprise. My driver, Sonab's tub guy, was there, and they treated me to an herbal hot stone bath in a wooden tub at the family farm of Sonab Tub Guy. After this deliriously delicious soak, I got to have a home-cooked meal with Sonam Tabgai and his family in Saigon. Like I say, it was a perfect day. Next day, I was supposed to fly back to Kathmandu, spend the night, so the next day I would catch my long series of flights home. I got up that morning, I pulled back the curtain, I couldn't believe my eyes. Oh my God, the whole landscape was blanketed in white. It had been snowing all night. Oh, it was so gorgeous. And just think, Michael, if this had happened the day before, you wouldn't have been able to go up to Tiger Nest. Aren't you lucky? But then it didn't stop snowing. Uh-oh, what if my flight doesn't leave? What if I miss my connection in Kathmandu? I scrambled, got packed up, went downstairs, met Saiwang. Saiwang, do you think the flight's going to leave? Can we call the airport? What do you think? No, Michael, you cannot call the airport. We have to go in person, and I'm sorry to say it's against the law for me to go inside with you. That once I get to the terminal, that will be goodbye. Oh, now I'm starting to panic a little bit. What if that flight's canceled? I've been planning for this trip for a year. I've had this seat for a year. I have to have an aisle seat. There are 15 seats across in those Airbus 380s on the South China Air. I know if they reschedule me, I'm going to be in a middle seat. I'm going to kill somebody. I can't do it. I wasn't expecting a pop quiz in Buddhist philosophy at this point in my journey. Just breathe, Michael. Pay attention to what's in front of you. Oh, look, the kids playing in the snow. They're so happy to be released from school. I get to the airport and I have this tearful goodbye with Saiwang, which doesn't exactly feel like goodbye because I'm not sure I'm leaving. He tells me he'll wait in the parking lot for an hour just to make sure I get off okay or we come up with a plan B. I get inside the terminal, becomes very apparent there's no electric power here. There are no lights, there's no computer screens, there's no PA system. There's one teeny woman behind a desk and hundreds of frantic passengers in front of her. Now, I have to say Bhutan is the most Buddhist country imaginable. You've never seen anything like it. It's not just a religion, it's not a way of life, it's in their DNA. I wait through this impossibly long line. I get up to this woman and she looks at me so kindly, smiling. Yes, sir, how may I help you? As if she has all the time in the world, as if she hasn't just been dealing with hundreds of disgruntled passengers. I tell her about my desperate need to get back to Kathmandu and about my aisle seat, and she kindly listens and explains that if the flight is canceled, the airline will have to put us up in another hotel for the night in Paro, but there's a chance another flight could go out tomorrow morning, which would get you back to Kathmandu in time to make your connecting flights home. So, of course, the flight was canceled. Thank God Saiwang was still there. He could drive me to the new hotel, so at least I didn't have to deal with shuttle buses and all of that. We get to the hotel. It's very clear there's no electric power here either. There's a blackout all over Paro. There's no heat, no hot water, no electricity, no internet, no way to contact Scott, tell him I may be not making it or to let work know. And it is so cold. I put every article of clothing I brought with me on and got under the covers just to keep my teeth from chattering. This little Buddhist exercise was going on too long for me. This isn't what I wanted my trip to be about. And as the day grew on, it got a little darker, and I thought, well, I've got no way to see in this room. There was a candle, but no match, and I certainly wasn't going to use what was left of my cell phone battery for a flashlight. So I trudged through the snow up to the lodge to see if they've got a match. And when I get there, a man who appears to be from the airport comes walking in. I grab him before anybody else can. Excuse me, sir, are you from the airport? Do you think my flight's going to leave tomorrow? What do you know? Of course, sir, but first tell me, how do you like the hotel? How do I like the hotel? My inner ugly American is starting to wake up. Well, it's very nice, but there's no heat, and there's no hot water, and there's no lights, and there's no electricity, and no internet, and I need to get home. Yes, sir, he says, so kindly. All over Paro. No heat. No hot water. Said with all the compassion and equanimity in the world. It was such a striking example. I thought of calling this talk, How Do You Like the Hotel? I've never seen anything like it. I don't think I have the genetic material for that kind of perspective. It's staggering to me. Happily, my flight did leave the next morning. I sailed past Mount Everest, stunning view against the sapphire sky, land in Kathmandu an hour later, run across the tarmac, run through immigration, run through customs, run back out on the tarmac, and run up the gangway into my plane and into my aisle seat as they close the door behind me with just seconds to spare. Sometimes things work out. My grandmother Anne, my mom's mom, was a born worrier. She worried about everybody and everything her entire life. Toward the end of her life, She had a lot of health issues, in and out of the hospital, lots of procedures and surgeries. I went to see her after one surgery or another, and they wouldn't let me in the recovery room, I remember, but I could see her in there and I could talk to her over the threshold. I said, "How you doing in there, Graham? Honey boy, you get yourself all worked up over these things and it's just never as bad as you think it's going to be." Took her 83 years to come to that simple wisdom. She has what it takes to do life. She has what it takes to make the journey. She can have faith in her capacity to respond. A couple years later, I got a real exercise in self-compassion. It was January 2nd, I think, 2020, my first day back to work after the New Year holiday. I was driving home from the clinic in Santa Monica, going east on Santa Monica Boulevard. As I crossed Barrington, a woman traveling south ran a cherry red light and smashed into my driver's side door with me on the other side of it, totaling my 13-year-old Prius, a car from which I was hoping to squeeze a few more years, so much so that I had just put $5,000 into it for a replacement hybrid battery and new tires, a total loss. Happy New Year. So I had to spend money I didn't want to spend to get a replacement used car. And yeah, it was nice to have a newer car, but I'd rather have had the money that it cost me. 10, 11 months later, it's Christmas Eve, 2020, height of the pandemic. Nobody's vaccinated yet. We're all in isolation. Do you remember how surreal that was? 4:30 or so in the afternoon, Christmas Eve, I hear what sounds like an explosion in front of the house. The whole house shook. Oh no, what's that? I went outside, all our neighbors were out on the street already. Some kid running a drug deal gone bad had smashed into my new car with such velocity that he knocked it clear in front of the house in front of me, and our next door neighbors. No! I could not accept this reality. I went out of my mind. God bless Taylor next door, just the person you want in a situation like this. He takes down all the information, takes the photos, talks to the cops, gets the insurance stuff. Well, I'm just melting down. And he keeps saying intermittently, Michael, it's okay. Michael, it's okay. I finally snapped. Quit saying that, Taylor. There's absolutely nothing about this that's okay. God bless Lisa across the street. She came up right behind me and whispered, "You're absolutely right, Michael. Nothing about this is okay." Sometimes you just need your feelings affirmed. You know what I mean? But still, there was no way I was accepting this reality. And I'm someone who has a very low tolerance for injustice, particularly what I perceive as spiritual injustice. I mean, look at what I do for a living, for Christ's sake. Is it too much to ask that I could get one car totaled, have to buy a car I didn't want to buy, and keep that car nicer for at least 10 months? Apparently, yes. Too much to ask. Answer to that question is always yes. It's too much to ask. And everyone whom I told about the incident responded, as you might imagine, "Oh, just be grateful you weren't in the car. At least you're okay. It's just a car. It's just material things. It's just money." And the more I heard it, the more I wanted to kill people. I knew they were right, of course, but I wasn't remotely close to that perception or that reality. It took me a good week to come up with one word to describe how I felt accurately. Forsaken. Spiritually forsaken. The universe had somehow broken this imaginary contract with me that I had held, as if you can still be a good person and do good things and things will work out. I was forsaken. And because it was holiday time, the insurance company took a good week to come tow that wreckage away. So every day to go out and get the paper, get the mail, I'm confronted with the violence of it and the injustice of it. And when they did finally come to tow it away, I'd gone outside to empty the glove box, get all my crap out of the car. I astonished myself. They towed it away, and I just sobbed, as if they were wheeling my dead mother out of the hospital room. And I'm not a car person at all. I went inside the house and sobbed. Scott was so dear, and he just held me, and I was so embarrassed for carrying on so. I said, "Scott, you know, this isn't about the car, right?" said, I know. I'm a swimmer. I swim every day religiously, partly for fitness, partly to just keep my sanity. And during the pandemic, it was really hard to find a place to swim with all the gyms closed. There for a while, I was schlepping out to Glendale because they had a community pool that was open on very limited basis with very strict contact precautions. Every day I had to scramble to get a reservation to swim for 45 minutes. After the incident, I drive out there and I swim and I come back thoroughly disgusted with myself for not being able to let this go and get past it. Having a little conversation with myself as I'm driving home down Forest Lawn Drive, past these two enormous cemeteries, Mount Sinai and Forest Lawn, saying, look up there, Michael, there's hundreds of thousands of dead people. They'd give anything to be back in a body and be dealing with something as stupid as your car. Doesn't that jog you loose from all of this? No. And with that awakening, a light bulb went on. My God, if that doesn't loosen it, maybe this is a deeper wound that requires my attention, my intention, investigation, but most of all, compassion, tenderness, to find out what's going on here without the need to judge it or compare it or contextualize it. And with that awareness, I could start to float for the first time towards something we might call acceptance, but more important, self-compassion. It can be really hard sometimes to feel feelings we do not want to feel. We want so desperately to be strong and to move on, and particularly when those feelings aren't exactly congruent with cultural norms and expectations, to be that upset about a 13-year-old car. But the feelings aren't going away. I've come to firmly believe that we move into that through that doorway of self-compassion, and then we can eventually dance, maybe the great way, with that acceptance and equanimity. Because you know what? Soon we'll be without the moon, humming a different tune, and then there may be teardrops to shed, but while there's moonlight and music and love and romance, let's face the music and dance. So be it.